Good evening, everyone, and this is Prithvi, and I'm Associate Manager Human Resources at Zoin Group, and your host for this evening. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar. But before we dwell into our enlightening discussion on from start to scale, navigating challenges in growing GCCs, allow me to guide you through our journey with the GCC workplace thus far. The Workplace Awards has become a symbol of excellence, recognizing and celebrating the remarkable achievements of both organizations and individuals. We're thrilled to announce that the grand event will be held on August 2nd, 2024 at the luxurious Conrad in Bengaluru. Prepare yourselves and mark your calendar for an unforgettable event. We're excited to announce that we have received over 400 plus nominations encompassing both organizational and individual categories. Almost 40% of the nominations came from the companies with less than 500 employees. Companies with 500 to 1,000 employees contributed to around 18% of the nomination. Those with 1,000 to 5,000 employees make up to about 24%. We also have around 12% of nominations from the companies with 5,000 to 10,000 employees and about 8% from those with more than 10,000 employees. What's particularly noteworthy is that 40% of these nominated companies are listed companies, showcasing a broad spectrum of participation from both well established as well as emerging companies. It's important to mention that all of these companies are based in India. So, what could be more prouder than this, right? Also, I would like to remind you that the nominations for the individual categories are still open until June 15th. So, if you have not nominated yet, then there is still time. Now let's talk about what you can expect on August 2nd, 2024. It's an invite-only gathering, and we are anticipating the presence of over 400 renowned attenders from more than 250 companies. This will include CEOs, site heads, CHROs, HR leaders, TA leaders, and engineering leaders. And this event will feature 40 plus eminent speakers indulging in keynote sessions, roundtable dialogues, expert panel discussions, fireside chats, networking opportunities during lunch and dinner, and the GCC Expo. Moreover, we have also planned 10 plus captivating engagement sessions to keep the day dynamic and interactive. Looking ahead, we are also excited to announce an upcoming event, the CHRO Roundtable with the Karnataka government. This significant gathering is scheduled for the last week of June at Vidhan Sauda, Bengaluru. Stay tuned for more details as we finalize the arrangements. For any further questions or further information, feel free to contact us. We are also open for partnerships, so we would be more than excited to collaborate with you. Our details are displayed on the screen. Please make note of the details displayed on the screen. Thank you. So that's all about GCC Awards. Now, moving ahead with today's webinar, let's quickly glance at the guidelines. The content discussed and presented solely belongs to GCC Workplace Conversation. To ensure quality, both camera and mic have been disabled. The chat will be open following the end of the discussion for question and answer. Participants accessing the session through LinkedIn are encouraged to post their inquiries in the comment section, while those connecting via Zoom are invited to utilize the dedicated Q&A section for questions. For technical support, please note down the contact number displayed on the screen. Now, moving ahead to the most important part of today's webinar, let's meet our esteemed speakers who will be sharing their thoughts and views today. First up, we have Dr. Anilesh Seth, a seasoned executive with doctorate from ISP Hyderabad, has excelled in establishing growing captive firms like Anthem Incorporated, Legato, SuperValue, and JCPenney. He has rapidly scaled Legato to 7,000 associates across 4 centers in 2 years. An expert in offshore capabilities, Anilesh now drives success as an independent strategy consultant in the GCC space. A very warm welcome to you, Anilesh. Next, we have Venkateshan Ramasubramanian, VP and GM India at Zoom Info India Private Limited, leading a team of 500 in Chennai and soon Bengaluru. Previously, he led global platform teams at Blue Yonder and development centers in Taiwan for Zebra Technologies. Passionate about technology and talent development, Venkatesan holds a BE from NIT Trichy and an MS from Polytechnic University NYU. A very warm welcome to you, Venki.
Thank you. Thank you, Prithvi.
We also have Romit Sain, Director of Product Management at Blackhawk Network, oversees key product areas and a team of 500 in Bangalore and Calicut. With 18 years of experience at companies like Forsive and Sears Holdings, Romit has a background in electrical engineering and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, focusing on delivering innovative, user-centric solutions. A heartfelt welcome to you, Romit.
Thank you, Prithvi. Thanks, everyone.
Up next, we have Mrinal with 22 years of experience setting up, scaling up, and managing GBS GCC organizations. She has worked with organizations like GE Capital, HSBC, JP Morgan, Jardine, Lloyd Thompson, Novartis, and Sanofi. She has led multiple transformation programs and transition work over 5,000 headcounts. Mrinal holds MBA from IMT and also completed her master's in commerce. She's currently heading the Sanofi Hyderabad Hub GCC. A very warm welcome to you, Mrinal.
Thanks, Prithvi.
Last but not the least, moderating today's session, we have Puneet Gupta, founder and managing partner of Talron Global, specializes in helping foreign businesses establishing GCCs in India. He has been an instrumental in ramping up Versic systems in India, Wipro's Middle East business in Dubai, and Wipro's Global Delivery Center in Egypt. Puneet is acclaimed for his visionary leadership and dedication to innovation and excellence. A sincere welcome to you, Puneet.
Thank you, Prithvi, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Let me begin by sharing some very impressive data about the Global Capability or Innovation Centers, also known as GCCs in India. India is home to over 1,500 GCCs that employs almost 1.3 million professionals. It is growing rapidly at a pace of almost 11%, contributing significantly to the innovation and technological advancements of their parent companies worldwide. This number is projected to grow to over 2,500 by 2030. And this continues to play a crucial role in the global business strategies, emanating from India. Let's deep dive into our discussion with Dr. Anilesh and Venkatesan. We've seen that over the past couple of decades, GCCs have evolved from being cost-saving units, becoming vital innovation hubs that drive strategic initiatives for the parent organizations. In fact, over 70% of the companies now view their GCCs as innovation centers. And this is by a study by McKinsey and Company, in 2022. Things have changed a lot since 2022, even further. We can see a clear shift that reflects a broader trend where GCCs are no longer just support centers, but also are becoming central to driving technological advancements. Dr. Anilesh and Venkatesan, based on experiences, how have these GCCs evolved from being just captives to innovation hubs? And what strategic roles do they now play in fostering product innovation and driving technological advancements? Could you share some specific examples from your experiences? Maybe we can start with Dr. Anilesh.
Sure, Puneet. And firstly, thank you for inviting me here. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. I'm going to give a little bit of a historical perspective. It was in 1985 that Texas Instruments actually set up what is considered academically to be the first GCC, though I don't think that's exactly correct. But anyway, in 1985, TI did that. Subsequently, fast forward 13 years, we had a few more coming up: Exxon, Daimler, HSBC, General Electric, etc. The moment GE comes into the picture, everyone says, hey, you know what? We need to jump onto this bandwagon. So then by 2002, we had 66. By 2010, 750. And today, we have, as you pointed out, about 1,500. And by 2025, we're going to be having about 2,000 GCCs. Now, what has really caused this proliferation, and this proliferation, a lot of background to this is the move towards innovation, IP protection, product development, etc. What has really been going on out here? Yeah, we can attribute it to various reasons. We can say there's better connectivity, there's more Indian diaspora that is getting into it, and there are some successful cases. NASSCOM is doing a great job of selling it, blah, blah, blah. There are 50 other reasons that we can talk about. However, the biggest the reason for this drive is the changing definition of what we call the core. The core of the business has changed. Finance is no longer finance, it's fintech. Education is no longer education, it's edutech. Right? And health is no longer healthcare, it's health tech. Now, technology has suddenly become at the center of the company, and that's at the core. The moment you talk about being at the core, you are now talking about being able to create a capability that's going to make you competitive. And you asked for some examples. There examples are plenty that are taking place. We have, from a product development and innovation side, we know that Microsoft is developing products here. Amazon is doing the Prime Video. Amazon Pay is being done here. Schlumberger, an oil and natural gas exploration company, is doing proprietary algorithms from here, as is Goldman Sachs. Analytics and artificial intelligence is another area. All the retail guys are doing it, ranging from customer experience to optimizing supply chain and what have you. Then digital transformation perspective, we have, Elevance, the previous company I was with. They have developed a complete insurance app here in India. From a cybersecurity and cloud computing perspective, we have companies like MasterCard that are doing cloud-based fraud detection. And of course, not to mention the leveraging of the startup ecosystem by companies like Goldman Sachs, Cisco, Ericsson, etc. So these are some of the examples of how these companies have started maturing, moving towards innovation in a very aggressive way.
Interesting, Dr. Nilesh. Thanks. Venkateshan, would you like to add something on top of that?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think to extend what Nilesh said, GCCs have grown a lot in India, right? But they are still following what we call as a GCC maturity model. As Nilesh stated, when the GCC started, mostly they were looked as a back-end operation or a small QA firm or things like that. And they slowly mature into owning a small segment or market ownerships as a satellite hub. And then they mature to owning a full product or a business line, right? As the experience grows, as the innovation grows in the company, then they become slowly what we call as a full innovation or a transformative hub, where the full new products, or it could be a business line, or it could be a new innovation that comes from India, and they envision the product line or the customer base or a pure new market area, a white space that nobody has looked at, right? That's end-to-end envisioned, developed, and delivered from India. And many places you would have seen that they're also grown into the P&L responsibilities, right? So this is like the end goal or the envision where they do the end-to-end development across geographies, from solutioning, servicing, retaining customers, and so on. For the many past decade or so, the curve has not changed a lot. What I mean is the phases of the curve. But what has changed in the last decade or so is the speed in which the GCCs have grown in this maturity. There has been an exponential growth, and the timeline has shrunk so much that within a year or 2 years, the companies that start as GCC as pure backend to start with, due to the top talent or the product area, the go-to-market areas, wherever they started, it has just mushroomed into other areas. And the GCCs have grown from being that start of the maturity curve, which you have taken, for example, TI was an example. Maybe it took a decade for them to get into the final arena, but now it's like a year or 2 years or less than that, the GCCs get to that seat in the table. I think that is what has changed. And what has helped is obviously the technology, the talent that we bring in, the scale that the GCCs have seen that India can bring, right? All this along with the culture that we have, and we being English speaking and so on adds value, but the continuous concentration on the innovation and then being on top of what's coming, it could be Gen AI, AML, whatever it is, right? But being on top of that has helped a lot. Just an example, as you mentioned, for example, my company, ZoomInfo, we are here for 2.5 years. But when we started as a small go-to-market customer success part, but we have grown into product ownerships. We have grown into SMB and mid-market customer ownership that spans around 3,500 plus customers being serviced from India. We are a 24/7 center, in a way, supporting these customers. So I think many of the GCCs that are starting in the last 5 years or so become to the end goal of being that strategic ownership or being a strategic partner to the parent company very fast and furious, right? I think that's what has changed a lot.
Fantastic. This clearly shows that, the GCCs have actually transforming themselves into innovation hubs. And as you rightly said, over the last few years, the progress seems to be going even much faster. But I'm also, I'm sure that you would also agree that a very strong foundation is, required for the success of a GCC. I was going through a report from BCG, which mentioned that GCCs that are aligned with the, parent company's strategic goals, are likely to achieve, 2.5 times likely to achieve, higher performance. Mrinal and Romit, maybe from your perspective, what do you think are the critical success factors for laying this kind of a foundation, and how crucial do you think is to align with the objectives, of the parent organization right from the beginning?
Right. Thanks, Puneet, for that question. Actually, I was just hearing to Anilesh and Venki in the first response, and they've covered a lot. Um, the this industry, when I joined, and I'll share a small example. When I joined GE Capital, as you were saying, General Electric, about 22 years back, an uncle of mine asked that, why do you have a night shift? And do you produce bulbs there? Is it because you have to be there at night?
Yeah.
So that was the understanding of a GBS world at that time. And now if you ask anyone, they would have a slight idea, because one of their relatives or children or someone would be working, a friend would be working in a GBS industry. So that's the maturity that we have from last 25 years. So you're absolutely right that the parent organization's mission, vision, and the strategy are very important to be followed at the GCC. And if that's not done, you're basically a part of that organization. It's one organization. It's not a different. We're not talking about vendors supplying some services to an organization. We're talking about GCCs, which is an integral part of a parent organization. And because of that, it becomes very important, to follow the same model. Very few examples, the diversity, if that's the key aim of my organization, I would need to follow that or imbibe that in my culture as well as a GCC head. Now, some of the KPIs or some of the key outcomes that I see from my few years of experiences around talent management. And I'm not talking about any strategic imperatives here. It's all about simple KPIs that could be measured and that really relates to the success of a GCC. Talent management is extremely important because if you're talking about Gen AI, any other kind of innovation, that will come through the talent that you hire and retain. So it becomes very important, the time that you take to hire, the time that you take to onboard people, the time that you take to, the time that you spend with the talent to retain that talent, that is very important. And of course, along with it, the cost, whether we talk about it or not, whether it's a byproduct or it automatically comes. But we have examples in the past where GBS have been moved from one country to another because the cost gets higher, because the talent availability is also there in other countries. It's not that India is the only place where the talent is available. So I have personally experienced things moving from one country to another, and therefore it is important to keep the cost also in control. So these two predominantly will remain on the top of the list, along with, of course, there are other things that can be achieved, which is, how well you communicate with the parent organization, because in order to understand the strategy, that communication, two-way communication is very important. So, and taking the feedback both sides becomes very important. So I'll stop there for Romit to add to that.
Sure, and I'm sure there is something the stakeholder management also would play a critical role right from day one of setting up the GCC. Maybe Romit, you can take it up from there.
Yeah, thanks, Puneet, and thanks, Mrinal. I think Mrinal has covered a lot of ground, and some of the points that I might be talking to might be reiterating some of the previous points. I feel some of the critical success factors for laying a strong foundation for the GCC, for a GCC in India, they would be, as Mrinal has already pointed out, and you have too, aligning with the parent organization. And that comes with ensuring that the goals, the objectives, and the operations of the GCC are closely aligned with the strategic priorities of the parent organization. Uh, and that comes in some ways through collaboration and communication, right? You have to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing across teams and departments within the GCC and with the parent organization. And then the third thing that you got to do is continuously evaluate the progress over time, where you regularly kind of evaluate the outcomes to identify areas for improvement and optimize certain processes in line with the parent entity. Now, aligning the objectives of the GCC with the strategic goals of the parent organization, as I said, is very essential from the outset for achieving strategic coherence. This alignment kind of ensures that GCCs, do not become siloed entities that may kind of inadvertently work at cross purposes with the organization's strategic objectives. In fact, they contribute towards the sort of the global success of the global organization as a whole. And citing a quick example from kind of my company, which is Blackhawk Network, we have had practices starting from the very beginning, starting from the inception of the GCC in India. We have had practices like global town halls, global all hands, product and technology reviews, even the rewards and recognition events, which we have conducted. They have been conducted at a global level, including all employees from all the GCCs around the world. This certainly fosters a culture of one team and helps align with the parent organization from the very beginning, right? So, I think those are some of the key things that we got to keep in mind when we talk about success, GCC success.
I think you brought out a very, very important point here, Romit. So while we are talking about the strategic alignment, at the same time, you are also bringing out that, the GCCs cannot work in silos. And that brings about a very important point in terms of, what is the level of independence, a GCC should have from its parent organization. And that is predominantly not only in terms of siloed approach, but also to see how we can optimize innovation and efficiency. So maybe I can request Dr. Anilesh to share some thoughts on what would be the potential benefits and drawbacks of granting GCCs a high degree of independence or the other way around.
You ask a very interesting question, Puneet. This is the $1 million question for most.
Yeah, sometimes it is a very touchy subject as well.
It is. Many of the conversations I've had with GCC leaders revolves around this. On the one hand, we are saying that there has to be alignment with overall corporate goals. There's a mission, there's an objective. And as Romit was talking about, it's a global team, it's a one team, all of that is being done. Now, this is something that I would refer to as the antagonistic duality between integration and differentiation. Integration means how closely you're aligned with the parent company. Differentiation is how far apart you are, how siloed you are, how independent you are. If you're wanting to create a one-team culture, if you're working on the same objectives, it has to be joined at the hip. If there's product development that's taking place and you have the product owner sitting in the United States and their extended team is in different countries, including India, they are calling the shots. So there's no two thoughts about it. Any delivery head in India isn't going to be calling the shots. It's really the business owner that's calling the shots. So to that extent, they're going to be joined absolutely at the hip. Now, being a global organization that they've set up in India, 100% subsidiary, the company is also exposed to a certain amount of fiduciary risk, governance risk, and so on and so forth. They have to make sure that they're well covered. And therefore, there's going to be a lot of global policies that are going and oversight that's going to apply. And however, you will find that there is a fair amount of tweaking that has to be done at the India level to accommodate specific nuances of how to work in India. Salaries, for example, annual increments, for example. All of these are what are going to happen in India. And sometimes the alignment is so tight that even if you have to add a single administrative assistant, you need to go back there for approval. It can be as tight as that. When you're going and making an announcement in social media, you need to go and seek permission. I'm sure many of the GCC leaders, when they come onto panels like this, they have to go and seek permission, saying, I'm going to go ahead and speak. Can I go ahead and speak? And they're going to say, okay, what is this all about? They're going to first understand what's going on. Then they're going to go ahead and give the permission. So that's really, I think, what's going on. The moment you make it an independent siloed thing, what's the disadvantage? You become a vendor. And that's completely taking you away from your original objective. So the reality lies somewhere in the middle. Right? If you look at the continuum of integration, differentiation, the reality lies somewhere in the middle, and it'll also depend upon your stage of maturity. Now, if you're opening up a new market, you can start becoming more independent because you're getting into sales and revenue and so on and so forth. But the moment you're a delivery organization, you're tightly joined at the hip.
I think that's exactly why Deloitte also mentioned that if you have a high degree of operational independence, but a very strong strategic alignment, the likelihood to exceed the performance is much higher. So I think you summed it up very very well over there. But let me shift gears a little bit here. Let's see if we can address some of the primary challenges. And Mrinal did mention about the talent management, which is again a very very touchy subject for most of the GCCs. So while on one hand we might say that India has a large talent pool, volumes are high, but still there is some kind of an angst or a anxiety, I would say, in India. Maybe I'll ask Romit to touch upon this particular point, and then Mrinal can take it over from there.
Yeah, thanks, Puneet. And you rightly pointed out that GCCs from the time of inception, they kind of face different growth hurdles, such as creating the brand equity in let's say India, scalability, talent acquisition and talent retention, and sort of managing operational efficiency. Something that is kind of close to my heart is the area of creating brand equity, because we are a new fledgling GCC. Of course, we have been around for the last 4.5 years. And I want to talk through some of those problems from sort of my experiences of having been the site leader at Blackhawk. Is the topic of creating brand equity. Now, Blackhawk is a 23-24-year-old company based. It's a very common name, very renowned name in sort of all of the US, especially California, and that's not the same here in India. Now, how do we solve that problem? There are a few ways to do it. And it's not a one-trick pony. It's not an overnight solution. You got to put in the hard work. It happens over time. But in order to create the right brand equity, you got to kind of, let's say, leverage social media platforms like LinkedIn to build brand awareness. I mean, in today's world, it is imperative to have a very strong LinkedIn presence to talk about the company, the 3 Ps I like to call: product, people, and processes. Uh, Contributing to blogs and platforms such as Medium, for instance, and that's what's coming to mind at this point. Provides an opportunity to showcase engineering prowess that can help create brand equity for the GCC. And I'm going to make a quick plug for the Zoin group, which has organized this webinar. Beyond exchanging intellectual dialogue about the challenges of growing GCC, this also serves as a very important platform for GCCs to showcase their brand and the stellar work that we all are doing in our respective companies. Engaging in, let's say, corporate social responsibilities, CSR activities that benefit the local community, enhancing the GCC's reputation and building goodwill. Participating in events such as like the market research and benchmarking firms like likes of NASCOM and Gartner help substantiate brand presence in India. And I think, and finally, something that I've found is very important to get right is pick the right set of people that run the GCC locally in the country, including the site leaders, the senior leaders, the HR functions, the business operations. These people are kind of your brand ambassadors for the GCC in the country. And the responsibility falls on them to exemplify the right brand and cultural identity through their interactions and practices, right? So that's the problem you got to crack in order to create brand equity for a large entity that is new in India. And once you do that, a lot of the other problems related to talent acquisition, talent retention, all of that kind of gradually falls into place, right? So that's sort of my submission.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. Brand equity right from day one is extremely important as far as talent acquisition is concerned. And we at Thaleron Global as well, talk about a lot of brand equity while we are setting up GCCs, in India. That's a very, very key factor for success of a GCC in India. But Mrinal, sorry, I'll quickly jump on to Venkateshan, for him to take this a little forward. I believe you've already touched upon the talent management part, so maybe we can hear Venkateshan's thought. I'll come back to you, subsequently.
Thank you. I think Romit touched most of the important point. But I think being relevant to the business and keep on creating the value and adding value is of paramount importance, right? And we talked about the GCC being mature, being a strategic innovative hub. Can they keep innovating? Can they keep understanding the customer base? What are the new areas they need to innovate or the business needs, right? And we have to be very cognizant that the parent company is also evolving, right? They are not a stagnant piece where you go ahead and say, I will keep evolving and I can catch up or be there, right? So it's also important that we keep in pace with the parent company's growth, which in a way related to how the market is reacting, how the customer base is growing, and so on and so forth. I think the challenges are different. There is no one size fits all here. The GCCs, when they grow from a 0 to 10, or a 10 to 100, or 100 to 1,000, or 1,000 to 5,000, I think the challenges are very well differ. Obviously, the main goal across these as the growth of the GCCs happen, for me, I think the culture is of most important. The culture that's formed in India, I think many of the panelists spoke about the diversity that we bring in. Anilesh spoke about how we can bring, for a better word, differentiation in spite of all the integration or alignment that we need, right? So what's the unique value we bring in? And also is our culture of the GCC, how much we are aligned to the parent company, right? And it could be starting with a culture of A+ players, right? That we want, or the type of resourcing, or the type of innovation that we want to do, the type of market we want to own. Maybe we don't want to do everything under the umbrella, but what are those niche areas the GCCs want to play? And is that well aligned with the parent company, right? And closely aligned to that culture is obviously the hiring and retaining. I think very important that we hire the best players, but we also retain them. And somebody questioned about the glass door on many other forums, right? So how do we keep that culture alive and still at the same level that we started from a 0 to 100 when we moved to 1,000 to 5,000? What is that culture we want to keep alive, and how do we do it? And in spite of all this hiring and attrition and so on, how do we keep that full energy there, right? So it could be, obviously it's important that we build the brand image to attract and retain the best talent. So again, there is no single answer. From people spoke about Glassdoor, but it's a social media to print media. We have seen billboards being put up for new companies or companies that are coming to sponsorship of conferences. And we touched upon many of the CSR and other activities, right? Also, more important is, I think, how do we create this engine of growth? And it could be from university relations, right? Obviously, many of us are hiring from universities, interns, and that's a continuous engine of new talent that gets in, right? So, and that also brings in new innovative ideas. Can we partner with universities as the labs, and Mrinal touched upon a little bit, right? How can we partner with the professors and create a labs and so on there? And also, it takes time to bring the value, right? And for example, my company is ZoomInfo, which is a go-to-market company, but it always gets confused with Zoom Video, right? So how do we bring that not only to the prospective candidates, but also to our own employees? How do they sell this? How do they feel in their family? Because at the end of the day, we are just having the employees, right? But the family knows that where they are working and so on. So how do we keep building that brand, and how do we bring that India or APAC or whatever the customer base, right? So, and the last but not the least is most important is the operational efficiency, right? So we are all here for a reason. And as we know, the IT landscape, the employee landscape is aging. Obviously, we are bringing in new and new talent from universities and fresh grads and so on. But as the aging of the IT workforce happens, obviously the cost of the employees or the cost of the senior managers, the levels that we have is increasing. So it's no more like when we started 2 decades back, maybe 5:1 or 4:1. It may not apply anymore. 4 resources in US, 1 resource in US applies to 4 or 5 in India. May not be at every team, may not be at every level, right? So it's no more the cost arbitrage, but how do we bring the value from these resources, and how do we align with the parent companies? I important and to be very cognizant, and it's a continuous work is what I
Yeah,
feel.
I think that's exactly why, you know, it is moving from a cost center to becoming a profit center or a value creation centers in India. But the right word, from a culture perspective, that comes to my mind is glocalization, which is a word, I remember being coined by HSBC. I think the early 90s, where they were talking about bringing in global expertise with the local expertise, creating a mix of that in India, and things of that sort. So that's the kind of culture, if I can say so, is getting formed in India, and especially in the GCCs. So while Mrinal, you did talk about some of the KPIs, and it's extremely important, that GCCs are a success to the parent organizations, meet their overall business objectives. Some industry experts even talk about some dynamic KPI frameworks, for measuring GCC performance. Why don't you shed some light on the key metrics and KPIs that one should consider when evaluating the success of GCCs, and how, in your opinion, maybe Anilesh can talk about how, in your opinion, do these matrices evolve as the GCC matures and expands their scope of operations?
Right. And thanks, Puneet. I just want to take another minute to conclude the previous question because that's
Sure,
very
sure,
close to my
sure.
heart. So
Yeah.
all our GCCs just revolve around the talent, as you mentioned. So I think it's very important that we have a value proposition for the talent. We're all talking about how we kind of talk to the stakeholders, how we collaborate with the stakeholders. But the more and more challenge that I am facing these days is what value do you create for the talent so that they plan to join you? It's not just LinkedIn, it's not just the social media, but it's also about what are the learnings, what are the opportunities, whether it's global opportunity or whether it's a kind of project that they want to work on. So what are those or team leading or growing in their careers quite fast? What are the opportunities that you are creating for them, and what is the engagement that you have with the talent? That also becomes very important. How often do you ask people, how are you doing, or what's your mood today? So I've seen some organizations doing a mood check every week. And one of the recent examples I heard was, if you click on let's say I'm very sad today, then it opens up an email and you have to write whether it's official, is there anything in office that's bothering you? So the organizations are taking it to that level. uh, I see it like a circle where talent is in there, and then everything else revolves around that, in the current scenario. So yeah, sorry, just wanted to conclude that because
Well,
that's
you
something
you you
close to
rightly
my
pointed
heart.
out, it's all about talent in GCCs, right? So while we might say customer is the king, but I would also say that customer is the king only when the employees are the king.
Right. Absolutely. And again, for the KPIs, I think it becomes very important, and it changes as the maturity of the organization changes, even for the GBS, So when we started, the aim was just to set up a team of 20 people, for example, So and just to provide the services that a particular vendor is providing, just do a pilot in-house, see if it works. And then when that 20 became 200 and when that 200 became 800, it was a matter of time and just a word of mouth, So that's how it's spread. But more importantly, again, going back to the KPIs, it depends on what the organization wants to achieve and what is the strategy for the organization. What do they want to do with these organizations? Usually, if you see the current GBS setup, it would always be in 2 or 3 or 4 different locations, and you need to have a unique value proposition for your own GBS site. So, for example, India is known to do digital or IT talent, and then to growing up scale very fast. So, if you need something at scale, India is the place. But if you're looking for a specific language, you need to go to another country, or if you're looking for a specific a specific skill set, maybe procurement, which is Europe related, then you need to go near shore in Europe or certain other places. So every location has their own value proposition, and that can be played upon very well, but that also has to be aligned with the the parent organization. I think I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier, but it's the KPIs that I have seen so far are ranging from, it's very different from starting from how fast can you hire to how how fast can you scale up a very niche role, and what all are the technology advancements that you can do from India that we depend on you. Otherwise, we'll put it in another Eastern Europe location, which is in fact cheaper than you and can provide us the talent. So in fact, in one of my previous organizations, we were building the manufacturing and supply organization from scratch, and we built about 300 people, and then the organization decided that we'll open something in Eastern Europe because you get the talent there, it's much cheaper, it's closer to their time zone, and so on. So that let's go for that. So again, the 2 parameters, I still say talent, cost, and the technology advancement, how you can support digitally is becomes very important. One of the key things that I've seen in India is there is a flexible, everyone is super flexible, which doesn't exist in any other country. So if you ask a person to work at 11 in the night, that person will work. If you ask the person to do something which is not in the job description, that person will do, expecting that that gives the person some recognition. Versus if you ask someone in another country, they will say that this is not in my job description, or sorry, I work only till 5 o'clock in the day. So this, I think, becomes very important when we are setting up the new organization, but not as important when we are, let's say, a settled organization or a matured organization. And then the conversations are a lot different from what we had done to get there. So, and that's how I'll pass it on to Anilesh to add, from a maturity perspective, the question that you asked, Puneet.
Sure, thanks, Milal. I would say we talk a lot about cost arbitrage, and Minal, you also mentioned that. And from cost arbitrage, we have moved to value arbitrage. And that's really what we're talking about. And within value arbitrage, I'm also going to talk about a term that is leadership arbitrage. Now we have in India fantastic leaders, global leaders based out of India, driving global processes. And many of them are even driving teams in, whether it's the Philippines or it's in Poland or in other parts of the world. So many of the GBSs or the GCCs, whatever term you choose to use, will have a lot of those processes being driven from India itself. So, that's one level of evolution of GCCs that kind of takes place. And yes, absolutely right. When we initially set up a GCC, we are focused on hiring and retention and budgets and cost control and all of those areas, cost avoidance as well. And a lot of these metrics depend also upon, yes, the objectives of the GCC itself and even the size. Let me give you an example. Let's take the, United Healthcare, for example, has about, I don't know, 26, 27, I may have the wrong number, but it's in that region. So many thousands of people. Now, if we took a sample GCC, which has, let's say, a hypothetical GCC that has 25,000 employees, and that's a large size, even if you're doing a $20 per hour saving, multiply that by 2,000 hours, multiply that by 25,000, I believe the number is $1 billion of bottom line save. Now, the contribution of that $1 billion is a bottom line contribution, but we can't just say it's a cost savings. It is now contributing to increasing your earning per share and therefore your share price in the international market. That's a huge impact. Now, obviously, a smaller GCC can't do that at 300%, 500%, 800, but they have other aspects that they are going to be looking at. And as GCCs have evolved and matured, what we are now looking at is saying, are we doing something that's important, top line measures? Are we doing something that's important for the parent company? Is something that we are doing or something that we can do going to result in customer retention, more sales, opening up new segments, newer markets, and can we create measures around that? And these are not local Indian measures. These are global measures, because now you've created this competitive capability that can go ahead and drive some of these metrics for the parent company. Now, it's well and good to talk about these things. What are examples? Simple example. In retail, there is a term called shrinkage. Shrinkage is what you're losing in your stores. And when you have self-checkout mechanisms, shrinkage can be pretty high. People just walk through the store without doing a self-checkout, and they get away with it. Now, how do you overcome that? Can there be innovation being done out of India? Yes, and it is being done. So India is contributing to a lot of, let's say, shrinkage savings in retail. Airlines, they lose a lot of money on baggage mishandling. That's another example of something we can talk about. Oil exploration has proprietary algorithms that are being done out of India. The search algorithms for any e-commerce site now being done out of India. These are all top-line measures, and these are impacting the overall business. So when we project what we are doing at GCC, we have to see how we can project these overall measures. Not easy to do. We are not saying you can take it out and say it's because of India, your share price has gone up by 30% or something like that. I'd love to do it. But the point is, it's an overall global value proposition that we are providing. Now, I'll add one more small here. Now, these are business measures. If in the overall scheme of things, it turns out that these business measures are not at the overall level are changing, and you're finding that the value that's coming out of India is not that great for a specific area, think of reshuffling your portfolio. Mrinal, you talked about how 300 people were sent to, that team was now set up somewhere in Eastern Europe. That's exactly what I'm talking about. There might be newer areas you take on. There may be newer geographies you take on. There may be newer areas you give to a vendor. There may be better areas you take back from a vendor. So this is an ongoing portfolio management, dynamic process that has to take place. I hope I've kind of answered
there is there are now teams set up to understand make or buy decisions. So
yes.
Whether you produce in the company or you kind of set up another organization, vendor, as you just said. So there are particular teams who are doing this. So you're right there.
Absolutely. And this has to be an ongoing process. I'm not saying you do it every 6 months, it doesn't make sense. But at specific points in time, this needs to be done.
And I just maybe instead of Puneet, I'm kind of throwing up a question to everyone. Although we talk about these measures, sometimes what happens, it becomes very difficult to understand what's the contribution, and I think you touched upon it, Anilesh. So how do you say that, let's say, because of a GCC impact, the sales have improved 1%, or the retail shrinkage has reduced by this much percent. So that becomes very difficult to gauge, and therefore that value arbitrage becomes very difficult to define and showcase as well.
Can I try to respond to that? And it's a difficult question to answer, right? Because isolating that particular number becomes a very difficult thing. I'll give you an example of a healthcare insurance company that, in healthcare insurance, you print a card, an insurance card, and you send it to whoever is the insuree. Now, this process was taking 70+ days in the United States. And the reason for that is they had split up that process amongst different vendors, and nobody was looking at the process from end to end to try to figure out. Nobody had ownership of it. And then finally, it came to India. And India had both the business process as well as the technology team sitting side by side. They tried to figure something out and they did it. And overall, this thing got cut down from 70 plus days to less than a week. Now, they are obviously working with the business owners in the United States. They're working with the IT teams in the United States, right? But a lot of the ideation, generation, process engineers coming from India, and they're doing it together as a team. You can't take step aside and pull out, this portion was done by India. It's very difficult to do. Therefore, my recommendation would be look at these successes on an end-to-end basis and say, because the India Center is there, we were able to achieve this. Rather than saying, the contribution of the India Center was 80% of that 1 week or something. You can't do that. It's very difficult.
And just to add, I don't think we should be doing it also, to your point.
Agree.
Because naturally, I think that puts a different type of a pressure on the teams, right? Hey, why are we here? Rather than that, what can we do and what can we innovate? And it's like a family, right? You can't say my elder son is doing better or younger son is doing better. And we don't do it in the US, various cities, right? I think that mentality needs to change, and I'm sure it will change as we evolve, right? So it's one family, one team together. To your point, we can't split it. And any of the metrics should be equal. Like, hey, you're measuring on a code quality there, let's measure the same. Number of patents in US, same here, right? None of the metrics should be specific to any region, is my thought.
I agree.
I,
Well said.
I think you're kind of right, Venkateshan. What maybe I can add over here is there are there are some local KPIs that need to be defined, while the global KPIs will be there and as a part of the one family, one team concept, which I completely agree, but there still need to be some very specific localized KPIs which will measure the ROI for certain functions, maybe certain processes, that Anilesh was talking about, that still need to be, taken care of and measured, But overall, yes, I agree with Anilesh that it needs to be end-to-end success of the GCC rather than just looking at piecemeal things. Very interesting discussion, and while we can keep on going and on. There's a lot of cases that we have. I believe we have time for just one more question, and that I will pose it to Romit. Where I would really like to understand, and we've been talking about value creation, we've been talking about innovation, from the GCCs, but then at the same time, having a balancing act between the routine operations and innovation is always a necessity to stay ahead of the curve. So especially when the GCC scale. What in your opinion would be some of the strategies on how this balance can actually be achieved? And maybe we can also talk about Anilesh did mention about a process being brought down from 70 odd days, if I heard it correctly, to less than a week. So maybe we can talk about some other innovation that has come up from your organizations, which have been effectively adopted across the parent organization or other GCCs globally.
Sure, great question, Puneet. I'll start off by saying that, and I'm going to echo a little bit of what Anilesh said. True GCCs today have kind of risen above the short-term value prop of the wage or cost arbitrage to more like a value arbitrage and, in fact, leadership arbitrage. And that is where GCCs are now owning business outcomes for the organization globally, right? So you'll have teams sitting, for instance, sitting in India, owning business outcomes and delivering them independently. Now, that does not come overnight, right? You got to put in the right kind of investment and people and processes to get there. So a few things that we could do right to kind of create that culture where you can balance innovation as well as the ongoing operational sort of imperatives. What you could do is, of course, you got to have a visionary leadership. And leadership must be championing innovations and setting clear visions for value creation. And when I say leadership, it's not just leadership in India. It leadership globally has to sort of support this vision, right? Employee empowerment. You got to empower employees at all levels to kind of contribute ideas and take initiatives in developing innovative solutions. Uh, I also feel true GCCs at a certain point of maturity, they should be hiring for innovation, recruit talent with a proven track record of innovation and creativity. You got to invest in R&D, for instance. The company and the GCC should allocate resources to research and development to explore new tech and innovative solutions. And that should be happening it's sort of in not just in locations in India. That's sort of global practices that, and people should be coming across from different locations, joining hands to sort of participate in practices like tech forums or hackathons, and likes of that. So I mean, over the last 35 years of 35, 40 years of GCC existence in India, uh, we have developed core engineering capabilities in multiple areas. We, as in India, has probably developed core engineering capabilities. I think we are seen globally as an engineering hot seat. We know that we go to India, we get great engineering talent. Now, that is great in itself, but there's more. If we have to own business outcomes, uh, we are talking a little bit about product and owning product outcomes, product management, and this is kind of what I do. That's my bread and butter, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Since our inception of Blackhawk India in 2019, our founding members, with the support from global leaders, took it upon themselves to find really solid product managers to work on multiple product areas. And of course, these product managers initially started working under the guidance and partnership of product leaders in what I like to call our mothership, Pleasanton, for instance, in this case. But over time, they have become more independent to a point they now own business outcomes completely. And we are delivering product features for the world sitting here in India. I don't think this story is very different from some of the largest product companies in the world who have decided to set offices in India. You can talk about the Microsofts, the Google, the Amazons. They start off slow, but as they find the right talent, uh, the teams here are kind of creating products for the world. So those are examples where you could be starting something uh, in India, and you could be delivering for the world, right? Even practices, right? Even practices. A small example that actually is coming to mind is about 3 years back in India, we started this idea of mentor-mentee. We started a mentorship program. This is an annual program that we started where we identified people, and through submissions we sort of ask people to nominate themselves for uh, to be mentored or to mentor others, and we kind of pair them up. We have a beautiful program that has kind of matured over the last 3 years, and very interestingly, this program did not exist in sort of our headquarters, for instance. And very recently, when I was in the US about a month back, I was talking to our CPO and CTO, and they loved this idea that this is something that we started in India, and we have a clear template of how we do it. We have processes we have learned and sort of improved over the last 3 years. And they actually wanted to take this template and kind of implement it globally in all other centers. So this is one great example of a process that started in India to develop people's skills and sort of competencies, and that has now been adopted all over the world,
Very
right?
interesting, Romit. Seems like a true GCC, model that is being followed here. With the kind of innovation that's what we've been talking about, and seeing examples from Blackhawk Network, really raises the bar, for the other GCCs as well. Venkateshan, do you want to add something? Maybe some innovation happening on Zoom Info here.
Absolutely. I think similar to what Romit mentioned, right? I think we are not only adding value in terms of the product growth or product in a way innovation and things like that. We are also bringing these new processes and ideas, as Romit mentioned, the mentor-mentee approach. A lot of such things are coming due to our diversity and different type of resourcing we have and different type of layers and all those things that we have. We come up with these ideas that are fastly adopted because the mothership, in Romit's word, sees the value, right? One example in what we have in my Zoom Info right now, and my previous company too, is we started this, what we call, in my previous company it was different, but here we started this whole hackathon, a yearly hackathon, that comes up with, obviously, with new process ideas, and we call it Atal because we're in Chennai. For folks who don't know Tamil, Atal means new value or new idea in a way, and showing your value. So we started this very small, only for engineering, 2.5 years back. And then the next year, last year, we started like opening up to CX and solutioning and services and everybody, right? So, and immediately after the first year where our mothership saw that, hey, this is big value, right? Because we saw new product ideas, new automation ideas. More than that, right? They also saw that multiple teams sitting in one roof, because that you don't see in many other places in our geographical areas, because there may be engineering in part of the other teams, but you don't see engineering, the product management, the DevOps, the IEs, the customer experience, the solutioning, professional services, finance and IT and HR people. All so many teams sitting in one place or one roof, and they talk. Many times they can interact with each other. Hey, there is a customer issue, and go to an engineer, walk and say, can we fix it fast, right? Or can we come up with a new idea? So the big value any GCC in India brings is that where the collaboration and the innovation that can come in with all these teams under one roof and working on a similar problem, or getting to talk to each other on what the challenges they are facing day to day. And that's where our target was this Atal, the hackathon was in Zoom Info, right? So we brought in like, I think 4 or 5 ideas that almost got into the roadmap immediately in the next quarter. And also the automotive ideas and the POCs we did were immediately adopted. So what the US team did, and then the Israel team, is they adopted this and extended this. We are also going to do an yearly hackathon, right? So similar to what Romit mentioned, that's one of the examples, but there are n such examples where such small ideas that we bring up, and then it's adopted, because obviously we do the same from the mothership, but motherships are always open to such great ideas that we can bring in due to our cultural diversity or whatever the reasons that we can come up with these things. They're always open to ideas because these are what the value that we can bring in. And these are beyond your point, right? Our day-to-day activities or day-to-day deliverables that we have. And these are the major things that I think the mothership also looks at the GCC to bring into the table.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Anilesh, final thoughts from you.
Puneet, I think that the last conversation that we've had around these examples has been very, very, very interesting. And I think that goes back to highlight what we were talking about, which is value arbitrage. I want to introduce a term here for everybody, and I'm going to call that's ambidexterity. That's a big strength of India and the GCCs. And ambidexterity means that you can use your both left hand as well as your right hand. What that means is that you can do business as usual and you can do innovation at the same time. India offers this unique ability to set up teams that can do this. We talked about flexibility. I think Rinal talked about flexibility of resources. That's the ultimate benefit that we can leverage out here. Many of the US companies or the European companies, the GCCs, for the traditional ones at least, who have been around for a long time and they've now set up a GCC in India, they've got such legacy behind them that for them to even think of setting up such an ambidextrous facility is impossible. Some of the newer companies, new age technology companies, those are product companies, Zoom Info or Blackhawk, I mean, they understand it. And they will encourage the establishment of such an entity in India, such an environment in India. A prerequisite here is getting an entrepreneurial leader. So yes, and somebody talked about the importance of site leaders. That is clearly highlighted in this particular instance. So I think that's a core value proposition that India has, is to enable ambidexterity for the parent company, which translates into competitiveness.
Fantastic. I think that was very rightly summed up, highlighting the positive aspects of GCCs in India. we can now open the stage for Q&A from the audience. Prithvi, would you like to take care? All right, let's see. Nitika is asking, what compliance challenges have you faced and how have you navigated them? Let's pose this to Mrinal.
I think coming from a life science company and also before that with a banking company, the biggest compliance I've seen is with the data privacy. So there are very stringent laws around data privacy in Europe and US both, and navigating through that and building up systems which could cater to that, so it could anonymize the data and so on. That becomes a must, and taking those approvals before you could begin something new is very important. And this applies to all the functions, not just some specific ones, but even finance or HR, any sort of function it applies to. So those are biggest challenges, and the way to navigate is take proper approvals, from the compliance departments. Mostly, you'll see if there is a particular compliance, you know, uh, every company would have a particular compliance, setup that enables this. And when you're starting up a new GCC, it becomes very difficult to understand what is that setup, because it's not at one place, it's not one team. So you have to navigate, ask questions to understand who is the right person to ask about the regulatory requirements, about the compliance requirements when you're starting up a new function or a new GCC.
Yeah, that's exactly why, Mrinal, Talaron Global is there to, help on the regulatory compliances all under one single roof. But that's a separate discussion altogether. Abhiram is asking, can you provide examples of how your leadership team navigated a significant challenge during the scaling of your GCC? Let's have Venki, address that.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's n number of such instances, right? I think in my experience, we touched upon the talent, right? I think the major challenge or the expectation is, if the GCC is very new and they want to scale up, right? People sitting, and if the mothership, so to say, they're not aware of the challenges in hiring, they feel that there are people, hundreds of people or hundreds of people waiting in the roads, and that just we can bring it in, right? I think setting that expectation back to it, and you can't do that, right? There are universities and others, but what is that right level of, we spoke about the right level of talent, the right level of process you need to set up, and then the culture that you want to bring in. Yes, you can scale up very fast, but you also lose the quality. So I think setting that expectation back, yes, you can bring in fast and furious in terms of the talent, but you have to, I think the major challenge is bringing that part of knowledge transfer, what works in India, what doesn't, or how to make it work, because what works in US may not work straight away in India, right? So I think some of these, I would say, expectations or what you have heard say from other companies or from books and so on, they may feel that, yeah, I have 100 openings. Can you fill it in 2 months? No, you can't, because normally the notice period is 2 months or 3 months, right? In many companies. So how do you combine this and work with your leadership to ensure that the unreasonable demands are not coming in? Because they're going to make product plans, roadmap plans based on these assumptions, right? I think that those are the main challenges, and it's a continuous teaching, right? We learn from them, we teach back to them what works, what not so work, right? So, and setting the process, the necessary documentation and continuous learning back to teaching back to them, saying, these are the things, and these are the universities, these are the people, these are the processes, and these are the timelines you can expect, because in US, a guy will resign in 2 weeks and can join after 2 weeks. India doesn't work that way. And obviously, there's an IT engineers, whatever, right? 60%, 40% of them don't turn up because they got a better offer, because window shopping the last day, they will go and find. So how do you teach this? How do you be aware of this or make them aware of this, right? So these are the continuous challenges. We can talk about number of those, but being in align with them and coaching them and setting those realistic expectations so that they don't make unrealistic plans. I think those are the biggest challenges every day we face, Puneet.
Right. Raksha Pawar is asking, what were some of the hardest lessons learned during the growth of your GCC and how did they shape your approach? Uh, Let me ask this question to Anilesh.
So Puneet, in fact, it's a part of the previous question too, in a way. There's one challenge I'm going to highlight, which will also answer this question. It's part of the learning. Is one of the biggest obstacles are the vendors. And I mean the global outsourcing vendors, and what really happens is they are losing business to the GCC. And they make all kinds of promises as to how they're going to help and support that transition and things of that sort. It never pans out the way you really wanted it to pan out. Now, what happens is, I'm talking about US examples here. I'm sure the same thing applies in other geographies as well. They'll go and knock on the doors of the senior leadership in the United States, and they'll say, you know what, I've got these NFL tickets. Please come on, and they'll continue. They already have a great rapport that's been established over here. You're a new person on the block. They've got this rapport that's been established over several years. They have the trust, they have the ear of the senior management. And then they go and say, how much cost savings are you getting? So much. You know what? For the next 2 years, I'll undercut my price. Don't worry. I'll take it over. Will you do it with me? You've been doing it with me for such a long time. Let's just go ahead and continue to do it. That is the big challenge that I've found when you're starting afresh. And when you're starting, there are stumbling blocks. Your hiring doesn't go as planned. Some people might leave the company. Expectations have to be set, as Venki was talking about. And that you have to do on a continuous basis. But as long as you have central mandate and management commitment behind you, you'll get through those pieces.
Right. Nitesh Shukla is asking, Gen AI is really going to pull out or even pulling talent to join GCCs or who are already working with GCCs? What are certain measures or strategies GCCs bring into action? I hope this question is well understood. Romit, would you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I am also reading the question. I'm trying to sort of peel the layers and try and understand exactly what Nitesh wants to, because Gen AI is really going to pull out or even pulling talent to join GCCs. Well, I mean, Gen AI is being thrown around casually in a lot of different conversations. We throw it around flippantly. So product companies, for instance, are vendors who work with product companies, especially, there is a Gen AI pull, right? As in there's a piece of work that we can leverage using Gen AI. There are specific companies that are working on this area. I'm putting up a very product lens and kind of answering this question. There are companies that are working on this area, and because this is such a hot area, as in this is sort of fresh in the market. There's a lot of new development that is happening, a lot of newer models that some of the biggest companies are coming up with. Lot of young talent actually want to work in this particular area, right? So whenever we put out, let's say we advertise for a Java developer, for instance. For a Java developer position, we might be getting, let's say, for each position we might be getting 100 applications. Interestingly, when we put let's say anything to do with AI ML, that number of applications almost inadvertently doubles. We are receiving 220, 30 applications, because there are young people who are trying to who are trying to tap into this opportunity to work on Gen AI. That is one way young talent wants to work in this space. I think if that's the angle to this question, probably I've answered a little bit, but beyond that, are you able to peel the layer of the question, Puneet?
Maybe
No, I'm not.
if I could add a little bit here, it's, Gen AI, we can look at it in two ways. One, whether we plan to use it or whether we're developing something on our own. So there are multiple tools in the market where specifically for some of the work that we do, there are tools that could easily be used. I'm giving a simple example of ChatGPT. You just type an email there, it automatically gives you an answer. You just refine it a little bit and you paste it. But I think that there was a term, used, or there is a term being used now, which is GPT prompter. There are roles that are being opened by that name.
Prompt engineers, sorry.
Yeah, right. So I think there are different. All the organizations are working on some or the other Gen AI project, and GBS, people from GBS are a part of those projects, either to pilot it or to co-develop it. Now, there are certain specific solutions that companies are working on, where some of the people, even from our GBS here, are contributing to that project, in developing those solutions. So I think the question is, it that it is going to add jobs, or I mean, pull out that not able to understand it very well. What is
Yeah, I
the
think
meaning of?
that's fine. I'm hoping that he would have understood. We've covered a broad spectrum of things answering this. But given the time constraints, I'm not sure if we'll be able to address all the questions. I'm picking and choosing the ones that I feel are most important. This is one question by an anonymous attendee. How do you approach leadership development within GCCs to ensure that leaders are equipped to navigate the complexities of global operations and maintain high standards of performance? Anilesh, would you like to address that?
That's an interesting question, a very, very
Yeah.
broad one or two thoughts about it. But clearly it starts when you're hiring somebody. You're hiring somebody as long as possible for, as I mentioned earlier, ambidexterity, flexibility, attitude. Those are some of the traits that you're looking for in a person. And I will add one more, which is domain. Domain, I think, is absolutely very, very important. Now, when you bring the person on board, then it's a matter of how that cultural indoctrination takes place. And it's one part of it is to ensure that the person understands the culture that is being set up. And obviously, there have to be appropriate onboarding programs, ongoing mentoring programs, ongoing leadership coaching programs that have to be put into place, as well as making sure there are appropriate integration programs that are put into place to make sure there is enough interaction overlap between the India leader as well as in the US. Now, keep in mind, a lot of this has to be done in the US too, because they are setting up a new facility in India, and they also need to know how to deal with the Indian entity. So a lot of change management has to be done in the United States too. It's a very generic answer. It's a very broad.
I think we did cover as a part of the initial discussion about the communication, two-sided communication, as well as your stakeholder management. As a part of that, to some extent, we've covered this. Let me take quickly. And Prithvi, how much time do we have to take? Can we take a couple of more questions?
We can take two or more questions. We are almost about time. We are
All
at
right.
5:30. We should wrap it up.
Sure, sure. Mrinal, this question is specifically asked from you. This is from Nitesh Shukla. He says, what are your key objectives while establishing Sanofi Global Hub in Hyderabad? And he also asks, and facing challenges in TA, which I think we have addressed already in quite a detail. So you could possibly take a shot at the objective points while establishing Sanofi Global Hub in Hyderabad.
I think it's and some people have covered it in their answers, is that buy-in from the parent company, building that trust, that you will be able to perform at a given location, is a must. That's where everything starts. So we can talk about talent, but there has to be a demand for that talent as well. And Anilesh very rightly said that there is a competition that runs not just with the vendors, but also with other the other GCC locations that you have. So the objectives are very clear, that you have to start small. So not every organization will grow up very fast. Every organization, every GBS organization will have their own pace. Some will be very slow initially, and will gradually grow, or some will be very fast and then would slow down. So every organization will have their own growth path. But again, it's important to align with the stakeholders what exactly is the outcome that they want to achieve from this GBS, and what are some of the some of the challenges that they would like to solve through this GCC. So it could be as simple as
Maybe you might also want to add this, since we haven't covered this particular point of the location strategy. Why did you choose Hyderabad as the location for the Sanofi Global Hub? It could have been possibly Ahmedabad, it could have been Bangalore, it could have been Kochi or Chennai, but why did you choose Hyderabad as the location?
So I'll be very honest, some of the organization, and I'll not say this about Sanofi, some of the organization choose a particular location because they have some presence in that location in that local country. So we're talking about global companies here, and a lot of these companies have business in India as well. And if there is a particular location for their local operations within India or anywhere, they choose that location so that they get a base, they get an office, they get a ready structure to support, right? However, in our case, we it was more because a lot of pharma organizations were already
That's
present in Hyderabad,
Yeah.
and the government was a very important player as well, and the previous government actually used to work like a salesman, going and selling that this is the place. In fact, their key punchline was that you bring us any offer, we'll match it, or we'll match it, or even give you higher perks or facilities. So anyway, so there are multiple factors to choose for location strategy. It has to be about talent, it has to be about cost, it has to be about the time zone suitability, and also if the people understand that global culture. So I could have set up in Jaipur, for example, but Jaipur is known for finance talent. So if you look at Genpact or Infosys or a few other companies, they have their finance set up here. But when you talk about pharma specific talent, Hyderabad and Bangalore are the two key areas. So that also becomes very important. What kind of talent do you want to build in your organization with the GBS?
I think very rightly said,
Other,
Mrinal.
if you talk about country, then there's the political stability, or how there are certain factors important, such as, is there a direct flight to the town, or do I have to kind of take another stop in before reaching that location? So it could be as petty as that to really strategic reasons.
Very rightly said, Mrinal. And I think we are almost at the time. Let me quickly wrap up the discussion. It was a very insightful, very thought-provoking session. I'm sure the audience would have, got an understanding on the evolution of GCCs to exploring strategies for success and overcoming their hurdles. We also gained some insights into the dynamic landscape of GCC operations. Let's carry forward this knowledge, leverage it to navigating the complexities, seize the opportunities, and drive impactful outcomes in this ever evolving realm of GCCs. Over to you, Prithvi.
Thank you so much, Puneet, and thank you to all the distinguished speakers. Your inputs were really very much valuable, and I think very much insightful. A lot of audience must have surely enjoyed. So before we wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone to nominate yourself for the GCC Workplace Awards, especially for the individual categories. As I mentioned, that the nominations are open until June 15th. So as your contributions definitely deserve recognition, and we are here to celebrate and honor them. So for feedback you'd like to share with us, please don't hesitate to email us to the address provided on the screen right now. We value your input and are always striving to improve our events based upon your suggestions. So thank you once again for your participation and support. Have a wonderful day. If at all there are any questions which needs to be answered, you can always share it via our email ID, and we will try to reach you and answer as much as possible. So once again, thank you everyone, and have a great weekend and a great evening ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.